This winter, the cold brings its own kind of silence, and in that silence, sometimes you can hear things that were never meant to be heard. My boss called it a pause when they laid me off 3 days before Christmas. I needed to be somewhere that wasn't my apartment, staring at my drained savings account. I found a cabin on one of those rental by owner sites for $200 for the whole week. No security deposit. The owner, Gary, said it was his grandfather's old hunting place. Rustic, but solid. He emailed me the lockbox code. I drove up in my old hatchback, the trunk full of cheap groceries. I'm not someone who gets spooked by creaky floors or wildlife. The cabin was exactly as described. Small, paneled in dark wood, smelling of pine cleaner and old ashes. The first thing I noticed was how hot it was. The thermostat was cranked to 8, Gary had said in his instructions. He'd pre-warmed the place for me. I figured he was just overzealous. I turned it down. That's when I heard the furnace kick and a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the floorboards. Not from a vent, but from a grate in the center of the living room floor. It was loud. I told myself it was just an old system. Maybe the blower was going. It was a sound you could feel in your teeth. The silence outside was total. A fresh snow had started falling just after I arrived, and by nightfall, it was a proper blizzard. The weather app on my phone lost its signal. The landline Gary mentioned was dead, the cord cut cleanly near the baseboard. That rattled me, but the power was still on, and the furnace kept humming its deep Constanci Noci. I tried to distract myself by poking around. In the bedroom closet, behind a stack of musty blankets, I found a small, hardbound ledger. It wasn't old. The first page was dated from just 2 years prior. It was a guest book, but not for compliments. Each entry was a name, a date range, and a single cryptic note in the same neat handwriting. Emi Jensen, menos já, 7, menos 9. Restless de Carson family. December 22nd to 26th. Too many questions. My own booking was the last entry. My name, the dates, and the note alone. Needs a win. The handwriting matched Gary's emails. My skin went cold. I slammed the book shut. A rational part of me said it was just a weird owner's private journal, maybe rating guests for future reference, but restless. Too many questions. The storm outside howled, sealing me. I was 30 miles from the nearest plowed road, in a house that suddenly felt like a display case. I decided to sleep with the bedroom door locked, using a chair propped under the knob. The furnace hum was a constant backdrop. Around 2 a.m., I woke up freezing. The humming had stopped. The house was silent and icy. I got up, my breath fogging, and went to the thermostat. It was off. The digital readout was blank. A power outage, I thought. But the clock on the microwave was still glowing. Just the furnace was dead. I went to the living room grate, feeling a draft of frigid air rising from it. As I knelt, my phone's flashlight beam caught something inside the grate, resting on a duct. It was a Polaroid photograph. I fished it out with a trembling hand. It showed a man, maybe in his 40s, standing right here in this living room, smiling awkwardly. He was holding a coffee mug I recognized from the cupboard. On the back, a date from last winter, and written in that same hand, satisfied. I threw the photo down like it was hot. The furnace kicked back on with a loud clunk, the hum returning, warmer air beginning to pour out. It hadn't been a mechanical failure. It had been turned off and then back on from somewhere else. I ran to the front door, yanking it open. The snow was waist high against it, completely impassable. I was trapped. I spent the next hour listening, every nerve screaming. Then a new sound, a soft, metallic scraping from the direction of the grate. Then a click, like a latch. I stood in the middle of the room, frozen, staring at that iron grate in the floor. It didn't make sense. Why would a heating duct have a latch? The climax wasn't a jump scare. It was slow. The grate in the floor lifted upward, not blown by air, but hinged from below. It opened just a few inches, and from the darkness beneath, a hand emerged, not to climb out, but to place a small, rectangular object carefully on the floorboards beside the opening. It was another Polaroid. The hand, pale and gloved, retreated. The grate closed softly. The latch clicked shut. The furnace hummed on, normal, as if nothing had happened. For a full minute, I couldn't move. Then, on legs made of water, I walked over and picked up the photo. It was me, taken through the living room window earlier that first afternoon, my back to the camera as I unpacked my car. On the back, it said, "Current model." That's when instinct took over. Not bravery. Panic. I didn't think. I grabbed the heavy iron poker from the fireplace, ran to the grate, and jammed it through the metal lattice, twisting it, bending the frame so it couldn't open cleanly again. From below, I heard a faint, annoyed sigh, then footsteps moving away under the house. I didn't wait. I threw on my coat, waded into the paralyzing snow, and fought my way to my car. I spent the night in the freezing hatchback, engine running intermittently for heat, staring at the dark cabin until dawn broke and a snowplow finally came down the distant main road. The police were politely skeptical. A weird ledger. A photo. They said it was trespassing, maybe a prank, but a detective took the ledger. He called me a week later. His voice was different. They traced the names. M. Jensen was a missing person from out of state, last seen heading for a solo retreat. The Carson family had reported a break-in at a rental cabin, but never filed a formal report. The detective said they'd gotten a warrant for Gary's property. They found the space under the cabin. It wasn't a crawl space. It was a finished passageway connecting to a root cellar under a shed outside. In the cellar, they found a small desk, a camera, developing equipment, and a corkboard. On the board were dozens of Polaroids, arranged chronologically over about 5 years. Men, women, couples, families, all taken without their knowledge at the cabin. My photo was there, pinned at the end. Next to each photo was a clippinja, local news article about a missing person, an unexplained disappearance, or sometimes nothing at all. Gary was gone. He'd cleared out before the plows even reached my car. The detective said he wasn't just watching, he was curating. He chose people who wouldn't be missed quickly or who wouldn't be believed. They never found Gary. The cabin was relisted for sale by a bank 6 months later. I still check the listing photos sometimes. The grate in the living room floor is gone, replaced by new carpet. I wonder if the new owners know what was underneath it. I wonder, more than anything, about the note that would have been written next to my photo in that ledger if things had gone differently. He'd already written current model. I think the next word was supposed to be acquired. My dad and I hadn't spent a weekend alone together since before the divorce. When I was 12. I'm 24 now. He'd been trying to reconnect for years, but it always felt forced. When he suggested an ice fishing trip up at Lake Grendel, just the two of us in his old pop-up shelter, I said yes. I think we both hoped the silence would be easier than conversation. Dad was a logistics guy, a planner. He had charts of the lake bottom, water temperature readings, the whole deal. The ice was supposed to be 18 inches thick. He drilled the holes, set up the shelter with its little heater, and we sat on buckets, watching our lines. The silence wasn't easy, but it was peaceful. Until I noticed the other shelter. It was an icy modern one, maybe 200 yards away, a dark shape against the white. Neighbor? Dad grunted, not looking up from his line. I saw no truck, no snowmobile nearby, just a shelter, sitting all by itself on the vast, empty ice. Maybe they came from one of the cabins, I said. Dad just shrugged. He was here for fish, not people. The wind picked up as the afternoon died, howling across the lake and rocking our little shelter. We decided to pack it in. As we were collapsing the shelter, I looked over at the other one. It was still there, dark and silent. No one had come out all day. Weird, I muttered. Forget it, Dad said, his voice tight. Probably just some guys who left it overnight. But his eyes kept flicking to it. He was a rule follower, and leaving a shelter out was against the Lake Association rules. It bothered him. By the time we had the gear on his sled, the light was fading fast. That's when we saw the figure, a person in a dark coat standing beside the distant shelter. They weren't moving, just standing facing our direction. Finally, I said, relieved. Dad didn't say anything. He started the snowmobile, but instead of heading for the boat launch, he drove a wide arc, bringing us closer to the figure. Dad, what are you doing? Just want to make sure they're okay, he said, but his jaw was set as we got within 50 yards. The details clicked. The person wasn't dressed for fishing. No bulky suit, no gear around them. Just a long, dark coat. And they weren't looking at us. Their head was tilted down, as if staring at the ice by their feet. Dad slowed to a stop. We're committed now, out in the open with the engine noise. The figure didn't react at all. Not a wave, not a turn of the head. The wind ripped between us. Hello, my dad called out. Nothing. The silence from the figure was heavier than the cold. Maybe they can't hear you over the wind, I offered, my own voice sounding thin. Dad killed the engine. In the sudden quiet, the only sound was the wind and the creak of the ice beneath us. The figure remained perfectly still. Dad took a few steps forward. Sir, man, you need help. No response. I felt a cold that had nothing to do with the air. Dad, let's go. This is creepy. He held up a hand, taking another step. Then he stopped. He was looking at the ice around the figure's feet. There's no hole, he whispered. What? No fishing hole? They're just that. Standing there. I squinted. He was right. The area around the person was smooth, unbroken ice. No gear, no hole, no bucket. Just a person standing on a sheet of ice in the middle of a lake at dusk. The figure then moved. It wasn't a startle or a wave. Slowly, as if on a hinge, the person turned their head to look directly at us. I couldn't see a face in the deep shadow of the hood. Dad took an involuntary step back. We're leaving, he said, and his voice brooked no argument. We scrambled back onto the snowmobile. He cranked it, the engine roaring to life. He turned us toward the shore, gunning it. I looked back. The figure was still watching us, a dark sentinel. Then As I watched, they turned their head back to look down at the ice, resuming their original motionless pose. It was like we had never been there at all. If you're feeling that chill right now, you're not alone. Stories like this live in the gaps. If you want to hear more, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps more than you know. We made it to the truck, threw the gear in the bed, and didn't speak until we were on the paved road, the heater blasting. "What the hell was that?" I finally asked. Dad just shook his head. Someone messing with us. Had to be. But he didn't believe it. I could tell. The next morning, over bad motel coffee, he was obsessively checking his weather apps and lake cam feeds. He froze on one image. It was a live shot from a camera on the lake's southern shore, pointing north. It showed the vast white expanse, and there, a tiny dark speck where we had been. The shelter was gone, but there was a dot, a person-shaped dot, in the exact same spot. "It can't be," I said. Dad zoomed in. The resolution was terrible, but the shape was unmistakable. A lone, dark figure standing on the ice. As we watched the live feed, the figure slowly raised one arm, not in a wave, but just holding it out to the side, perfectly straight. It held the pose for a full minute. Then it dropped its arm, turned, and began to walk away, not toward any shore. It walked with a steady, deliberate pace directly toward the center of the lake, until it was just a speck, and then it vanished into the gray haze of distance. It never looked back. It never broke stride. It just walked away onto the empty ice, where no one could possibly be. Dad and I sat there, not speaking, the motel room suddenly feeling as cold as the lake. My dad, being who he is, filed a report with the local sheriff's office. Not an emergency, just a suspicious person report. The deputy who took it was young. He listened, nodded, then said, "Lake Grendel, huh?" He pulled up a file on his computer. "You're the third call this winter about the stander out there." He said the first was a cross-country skier who saw someone standing motionless near the shore in a blizzard. The second was an ice fisherman who said a person in a dark coat walked right past his shelter, close enough to touch, without acknowledging him, and kept going toward the deep water. No one had ever seen a face. No one had ever gotten a response. The deputy said they'd sent a patrol snowmobile out after the second report. They found nothing. No footprints leading away from any of the locations. Just the spot where the person was last seen. "We don't have an explanation," the deputy said, almost apologetically. "We advise people to keep their distance if they see it. It doesn't seem to interact. It just ... is." He printed out the incident reports for my dad. All three descriptions matched. A tall figure in a long, dark coat, motionless, then moving with an unnatural, purposeful calm. My dad and I talk more now, but we never talk about that day. He sold his ice fishing gear last month. I found the sheriff's report in his desk drawer when I was visiting. He'd highlighted a line from the deputy's notes. "Phenomena appears to be recurring, location non-specific, no evidence of intent or interaction." I think that's what gets him. The absence of intent. It wasn't a predator. It wasn't a lost hiker. It was just a thing that happened. A rule of that frozen lake that nobody wrote down. A part of the landscape. I'm afraid one day, years from now, my own son will ask me to go fishing with him, and I'll have to find a reason to say no. After graduation, my friends and I were broke. The Sundown Ski Lodge promised budget slopeside living shared dorm rooms, lift tickets included, for $50 a night per person. The brochure photos were from the 80s. We didn't care. There were 6 of us. Me, Chloe, Mark, Jess, Ben, and Leo. The lodge was a massive, timbered thing at the end of a winding access road, half the windows dark. The manager, a wiry man named Carl, handed us keys to room 217. "You're the only group this week," he said, smiling without showing his teeth. "Storms coming keeps the crowds away." The room had 6 bunk beds and a radiator that ticked like a bomb. The first odd thing was the door. It had 3 locks, a knob lock, a deadbolt, and a heavy, old-fashioned slide bolt at the top. Chloe joked it was to keep us in. Mark tried the slide bolt. It was well-oiled, smooth. "Safety feature," he said, from, like, the Crimean War. We laughed. The view from our window was of the empty ski slope and the gathering dark. We could hear the wind starting to keen around the eaves. The storm hit in earnest after dinner in the nearly empty dining hall. It was a whiteout. The power flickered once, then stayed on, but the landlines and cell service died. We were marooned. We played cards in our room, the radiator ticking, the wind screaming. That's when we heard the first set of footsteps. They were in the hallway outside, heavy and slow, passing our door and continuing down the corridor. We all froze, Carl checking on things, Ben said. But the steps didn't stop at any other door. They just faded down the hall. A few minutes later, we heard them again, coming back, passing our door again. A loop. Leo, the Joker, yanked our door open. The hallway was empty, lit by dim sconces. No one in sight. "Hello," he called. His voice echoed. Nothing. He closed the door and locked all 3 locks. The footsteps came again an hour later. Same pace, same route. This time, we didn't open the door. We just listened as they passed, faded, and eventually returned. It was after midnight when Jess, whispering, pointed to the gap under our door. A shadow was blocking the light from the hall. Someone was standing right outside. We watched, breath held. The shadow didn't move. Then, slowly, it slid away. "No footsteps," we argued in hushed, frantic tones. It had to be Carl, or another guest we hadn't seen. Maybe a maintenance guy. But the silence of that shadow, no footsteps to announce it or carry it away. We decided, as a group, to go find Carl. Safety in numbers. We unlocked the door and filed into the hall. It was deserted. We walked to the lobby. The front desk was unattended. A single lamp burned. "Carl," I called. My voice was swallowed by the thick carpets and timber. We checked the office behind the desk. Empty. A door marked private was slightly ajar. Inside was a small, neat apartment. A TV was on mute, showing static. A half-eaten sandwich set on a plate. Carol was gone. That's when Chloe saw it on the wall of the apartment. Large, framed the map of the lodge. Next to each room number was a small brass hook. Some hooks had keys on them. Most were empty. Our hook, 217, was empty. But on the hooks for rooms 219, 221, and 223, rooms right next to ours, there were keys. Those rooms were supposed to be unoccupied. We looked at each other. The footsteps, the loops, the shadow. Were they coming from inside those rooms? We heard a noise then, from deep within the lodge. A metallic rasp, like a large bolt being thrown. Then another, closer. We ran back toward our room. As we passed room 219, I swear, I heard the faintest click of a peephole cover from inside. We barricaded ourselves in 217, pushing a bunk bed against the door. The footsteps returned almost immediately. This time, they stopped right outside. We heard breathing, low and even, right against the wood. Then a new sound, a soft, rhythmic whistle, a tuneless, calm little melody. It was the most terrifying sound I've ever heard. It meant the thing outside was at ease. The whistling stopped. We heard the jingle of keys, then the sound of the doorknob being tried. De law. A key slid into the deadbolt. It turned with a solid clunk. The deadbolt was unlocked. We were pressed against the far wall. 6 adults holding each other. The slide bolt at the top of the door was still engaged. We heard a faint, almost disappointed sigh from the other side. Then the whistling started again, but it was moving. We listened, ears pressed to the door as the whistling and the footsteps receded down the hall. But they didn't fade. They grew fainter because they were going down. We heard a door opener, heavy creaking sound we hadn't heard before, like a basement door. The whistling echoed up a stairwell for a moment and then was cut off as the door swung shut. A profound silence followed. We didn't move for an hour. Then Leo, trembling, said, "We have to go now." We moved the bunk, our movements frantic and silent. I was the one who opened the door. The hall was empty. We ran for the lobby, our socks slipping on the polished floors. As we passed the main staircase, I looked down the hallway toward the wing where we'd heard the basement door. At the very end, a man stood in an open doorway, backlit by a weak bolt from a stairwell. It was Carl. He was holding the door open with one hand. He saw us. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He just raised his free hand, not in a wave, but with a single finger held to his lips, in a gentle shake. Then he smiled that closed-lipped smile, stepped backward into the stairwell, and pulled the door shut. We heard the distinct sound of a heavy bolt being thrown from the inside. We drove through the storm, chains on, in a blind panic, until we found a town. We called the police from a gas station. They took our statements seriously, especially when we mentioned Carl's disappearance and the keys. A state trooper led a team up to the lodge the next day. They found Carl in his apartment, making coffee. He was confused, friendly. He said he'd been there all night, that the storm had knocked out his phone line, and he'd heard no footsteps, seen no one. All the doors we described, including the heavy basement door, were unlocked and led to ordinary storage or boiler rooms. The police were about to write it off as a group panic attack until one officer, checking the boiler room in the east wing, found something. The concrete floor was swept clean, but in a corner, partially hidden behind a stack of pipes, were a pair of large, insulated work boots. They were damp, as if from snow, and their treads were packed with a unique red clay that wasn't found anywhere on the mountain around the lodge. The state geologist's office later confirmed the clay matched a specific deposit only found in a valley 30 miles away. There was no reason for those boots or that clay to be in that basement. The police also quietly pulled the records. The Sundance Lodge had changed hands 4 times in the past decade. Every sale happened in late spring. Every new owner reported record-breaking winter bookings for their first season, then sold the property the following year, citing personal reasons. No arrests were ever made. The case was marked inconclusive. We never got a real explanation. Sometimes that's the worst part. The police gave us the all clear, but they couldn't tell us what the whistling was, or who the boots belonged to, or why a lodge with no guests needed so many keys. I drove past the Sundance last summer. There was a new for sale sign out front. The real estate listing called it a turnkey operation for the adventurous entrepreneur. I think about that phrase a lot, turnkey. All you have to do is turn the key. I wonder who's turning them now, and if they hear the whistling when the first winter storm hits. If you've ever stayed somewhere that felt just a little too quiet, share your story in the comments below. And if this tale stuck with you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who understands that the real horror isn't the monster, but in the locked door and the well-oiled bolt.